want to go through all my paint and organize what I have. I have found all of my watercolors. I have a travel kit, I have watercolor pencils, I have this artist sketchbox set, and I have this Royal Land Nickel, I think is how you say it. These two are watercolors in tubes. This is watercolor palette and of course watercolor pencils. I also have the paintbrushes with the water in the handle, you know, the ones you just squeeze a little bit to bring the water out through the brush tips so you can control the water a little better. I use it with my travel set just because it's easier and I don't have to worry about water everywhere and making a mess. I'll be using my water brushes with my travel palette and the watercolor pencils, and then I'll be using the brushes that come with these kits with these two. And then I want to do color swatches. So first up is the Royal Land Nickel set. This one comes with a pad of watercolor paper, so that's the paper I'm going to be using for all of the swatches. Use the pencil from this set for making note of which set I'm doing, what the color names are, all that for all of the sets. I started putting the tubes in mostly rainbow order into the little palette that comes with this set. This little palette is just a plastic 6-well palette. It's not my preferred palette to use for watercolors, but it does work in a pinch. Some of the colors here are a pain to open. They are older. I'm not sure exactly how old, but some of the tubes gave me quite a challenge opening them. Here I'm just writing down all the names for all the different colors, and I'll be doing the swatches beside those. I really like with the watercolor paint tubes how saturated you can make the color. I know watercolor traditionally isn't super saturated, but if you want to, it's a lot easier with paint tubes than with like the paint palettes. I'm trying to do a saturated patch on the left side, and then I'm trying to do like pick up a lot more water with my paintbrush and kind of pull some of that color out of the saturated side into a more watery side of things, just to show like how light the color can be. I didn't do it very good for the first few, but I improve my technique as I go, so that does help a bit. One of the things that did pop up, if you noticed, is I like to use 2 different water buckets when I'm using actual paint brushes. This makes it so I don't have to stand up and walk away from my artwork too often to change the water, because I do like using saturated colors, or maybe I'm just, you know, not the best at remembering I don't need saturated colors for watercolor. So I like to have a dirty water bucket, and then I like to have a clean water bucket. So with the dirty water bucket, once you're done with a specific color, you dip your brush into there, rinse it out real good, and then, you know, blot it on the paper towel. And then you can dip your paintbrush into the clean water just to get any leftover traces of the pigment out of your brush, and then you have a very clean brush to use to make sure that any color you grab won't be muddy or mixed up with previous colors you've used. So as you see, the dirty water bucket is quite dirty by the end of this first swatch for this one set. But the clean water bucket is still clean. You can see the bottom of the container easily, and it's really nice. And that is the last one, the white. It's very hard to see on camera, but it is there. Next up, we have the Artist Sketchbox set. Oh dear, I did not clean this. So this kind of palette is one of the ones I really like. There's a little well for each of the color pigment tubes that you do get in this set. Once again, I am writing down the name of the kit and the amount of tubes it comes with, and then the name for each of the tube. This type of palette is really cool. It does have the paint tube holder that is removable, as you saw earlier, and where it is removed from is a very large well for mixing, you know, color washes and whatnot. Then you have the 3 smaller wells that you can do smaller amounts of color washes, and then you have each little tiny individual well for each of the colors, and I like to fill them up with every color, and then you have all your colors there ready to go. I believe this was one of my first watercolor tube sets that I ever got, so I have no idea how old it actually is. As you can see, some of the paint tubes are quite crusty and giving me a hard time. These tubes kind of hurt to open when they're dried close like this, but it's not too bad. I did manage to get them all open, even if I did need a paper towel to help me get like a good grip on the lid to open them. For this set of swatches, I have a little bit of a better technique down than the first set, so I can really get those really pale wash-like swatches on the right. I did also swap my water during this, so what I did is I took my dirty water bucket and I dumped it, rinsed it out, filled it with clean water, and then just used my clean water bucket from the last set of swatches and used that as the dirty water, just in case, you know, have the cleanest water I have, but also not wasting water when I don't have to. So some of the colors are very similar to the last set. Both sets have 12 colors in them. This particular set has more yellow than the last one. The last one also has the brown and beige, whereas this one doesn't. It has like the extra yellow, the extra green. I think it also has an extra blue, maybe. So there's this blue, and then there's one more blue after. Now I'm going to move on to the watercolor pencils, just because I don't think I have enough space for the travel palette on this page. So with the watercolor pencils, I dump them out and then organize them in roughly rainbow order, just like the other palettes were, which I probably organized them when I first got them. I just find it easier to find the colors I want when they're organized rainbow, and then just be able to compare them across the different swatches. Having similar colors laid out in a similar way is just a lot easier to figure out. The one problem with watercolor pencils is that they have the similar problem to other pencils, like other colored pencils, is that the color part, like the core of the pencil that you get the pigment from, does tend to break. Especially when they're older and probably have been thrown around in a bunch of different drawers and moved around and stuff. Like, they definitely weren't taken good care of. So here I'm bringing out my watercolored brush, I guess. Sure, call it that. And I'm just going over the 3 different levels of pressure I did for the watercolor pencils, just to see, like, if you press too hard, do you get like streaks left behind? If you press lighter, are they not as noticeable? And then if you barely press at all, how much pigment comes out of that, and the streakiness from the pencil, like, is it still there? I honestly am not the biggest fan of watercolor pencils, but that's mostly because I haven't really used them much at all. Now we're going to do the travel palette. I really like my travel palette. It has more colors, so it has 18 palettes. They are little squares, but they're quite thick little squares, so there is a lot of color there. Some of them I have used more than others. There's just certain colors I prefer to use. This palette has a weird assortment of colors, so I was trying to come up with words for them, because there's no information. If there was, I have lost it over the years. So, you know, I'm going based on the order they show up from top left and then all the way down to bottom right. And just naming them what I think, borrowing some names from the other kits and sets, and then just picking up the color with my watercolor paintbrushes and trying to lay it down. A completely different technique than all the other ones, but I find I do tend to paint differently with a travel palette than I do with like an actual set that I would be, you know, sitting at a desk or like sitting down prep to do a lot of painting. Whereas my travel kit, sometimes I'm just like, oh, I want to do a quick little paint sketch of something I saw, or like I only have a few moments where I'm waiting to do something, waiting for something, whatever it is. So I'm trying to do a darker tone on the left and a lighter tone on the right. It's not going very well because I'm not using the same technique as before. Since it's all like one strip of wet paper, the color or the pigment does tend to travel across the water as watercolors do. I'm pushing the pigment back to the left side. It's kind of working sometimes, but not really. I do find that there is a lot more color variation in this kit. I mean, of course there is 18 different colors, whereas the tube kits had 12 each, and then the watercolor pencils had less than either of them at 10. So there is a lot more colors. It's great for travel kits because, like, I don't have anywhere to mix colors. let me know if you paint with watercolors. Do you like tubes or do you like palettes? Do you like watercolor pencils? Let me know what kind of watercolors you prefer to paint with if you paint with watercolors. Leave a like if you like this video and subscribe if you want to see more random art and creative videos. See you next time.